What happens when a polite neighbor becomes the target of a cunning woman who steals his water right from his property? He doesn't shout or fight, he just turns off the tap. What happened next shocked the entire neighborhood. Let me get one thing straight before we start. I'm not the kind of man who looks for trouble. Never have been. I grew up on the South Side, worked 33 years fixing heating and air for folks who never said thank you, raised 2 daughters by myself after my wife passed, and earned every wrinkle on my hands keeping my name clean and my dignity intact. But the one thing I will not tolerate: somebody thinking they can walk over me because I'm polite. So imagine my face the first time I saw Karen. Yes, that kind of Karen. Stealing my water like I owed her a favor. Now don't get it twisted. I ain't talking about a little drip. This wasn't no kid running through the sprinkler or a neighbor rinsing their hands. I'm talking about a full-grown woman, rolled up in her Range Rover, fake pearls swinging, digging through my backyard, tapping into my outdoor faucet like she owned the deed. But let's rewind the tape. It started a couple weeks after she moved in. Her house was 2 doors down from mine, and from the second she rolled up, I knew the piece was done. She had that community organizer look, and I don't mean someone who helps out at the food bank. No, sir. She was the kind who walks around with a clipboard nobody asked for, telling folks they're in violation of rules she printed off Google. First time I saw her, she was arguing with Miss Geraldine about the color of her porch chairs. Second time, she was recording the mailman for walking across her lawn. Third time, she was at my spigot with a damn hose. I had just come out to feed my dog Mookie. Sweet old German Shepherd. More loyal than any human I know, and I froze. I squinted. I rubbed my eyes. There she was, crouched over my faucet, twisting the valve like it was her weekend project. Can I help you?" I asked, stepping out from behind the shed. She jumped, dropped the hose like it bit her. "Oh, you must be Reginald. Only people who call me Reginald are bank tellers and people about to lie. I'm Karen. We just moved in. Our builder messed up the piping and our water pressure's awful. I figured I'd borrow a little from yours, just for today. Now here's where I messed up." I said yes. Why? Because I still believed folks had the decency to stop after one favor. I told her she could use it, just that day, and she acted like I'd handed her a blank check. Smiled that big suburban smile and said, "Bless your heart. That's Southern code for you're too soft to stop me." The next morning, I went out and found the hose still connected. Sprinklers were on. Lawn was wet. Her flowers looked better than mine. I shook my head, turned off the spigot, and coiled the hose. Thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, I saw a brand new green hose stretched from my backyard fence into her yard. This woman had fed it through the cracks in the planks, like she was planning a water heist. I walked the line like it was a crime scene. At the end, I found a splitter screwed into my faucet with her side marked permanent. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with a taker, and takers don't stop until you push back. So I installed a spigot lock. Heavy duty, weatherproof, $35 from Home Depot. Next morning, gone. She took it off like it was a gum wrapper. I knocked on her door, firm but still polite. I'm not trying to start fights, especially with a woman alone. She opened the door, holding a smoothie like I was a salesperson. "Karen," I said, "I noticed my water's still running over to your yard." She raised her eyebrows like she was offended I noticed. "Oh, you locked it. That was kind of aggressive, don't you think?" "Aggressive? It's my water." "Well, it's not like you were using it. It was just sitting there. That's not how private property works." "Well, excuse me," she sniffed. "I just thought neighbors helped neighbors." I didn't reply, because what I was thinking was, helping someone who helps themselves ain't neighborly. It's foolish. That weekend, she outdid herself. I was sitting on my porch enjoying the breeze when I noticed 2 landscapers unloading equipment into her yard, connected to my spigot again. I walked right over. "Y'all getting paid for this?" One of them nodded. "You know you're using my water?" He looked at the hose, then at me, then at Karen, who came out from behind the bushes like she'd been caught shoplifting but didn't care. I gave them permission, she said. On my faucet? She looked me dead in the face and said, it's on the side of your house facing the street. That makes it shared access. I swear to you I saw stars. I didn't even argue. I walked back home and made some calls. City water office. Police non-emergency. Neighborhood mediation. Hoa. Know what they all said? Sir, we recommend resolving it civilly. Apparently, my bill doubling wasn't enough evidence of harm. Apparently, someone physically tampering with my property wasn't urgent. Apparently, being polite made me an easy target. And Karen knew it. She knew it like it was a game, and I was the only one playing by rules. It got worse. One evening, my daughter Simone came over for dinner. She parked by the curb, and as we were bringing in food, she stopped and asked, Daddy, why is your faucet running? We stepped out back. Karen was filling up a kiddie pool. In my side yard, like she was in a public park. She waved. Hope you don't mind. I had a few guests over, and the kids needed somewhere to cool off. I looked around. There were 12 kids, 4 folding chairs, 1 Bluetooth speaker, and not a single sign of regret on her face. That was the day I snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I stood there, jaw locked, eyes calm. My daughter leaned in. Daddy, she whispered, you gonna let this woman run your life? No, I was not. That night, I pulled out the original plumbing schematics for my house. Old-school paper blueprints my daddy left behind in a box of tax records. I spread them out on my workbench like a general planning a battle. You see, before city water was installed in 1993, our homes used septic systems and rainwater collectors. My property still had the bones of that system buried under the side yard. And I remembered, clear as day, that my old overflow valve was still functional, connected to a backup tank. That tank? It hadn't been flushed in over 20 years. I got to work. Quiet, careful, calculated. And no, I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't hurt anyone. I just rerouted the faucet Karen loved so much. Let her enjoy what she thought she was entitled to. Because you know what? Sometimes kindness runs out. And when it does, all that's left is consequences. What happened next changed the game entirely. If you think it ends here, oh, you're not ready for what's coming. You ever sit on something so long it starts to boil inside you like a tea kettle left on high? That was me the night after that kiddie pool party. Sitting on my porch, watching her laugh like she was at a 5-star resort, while my water line pumped away like a charity donation I never signed up for. I wasn't mad anymore. Mad is too small for what I felt. No, I was determined. There's a quiet kind of fire that comes from years of biting your tongue, the kind that doesn't explode. It simmers. Then it builds. Then one day, it overflows, just like my water bill. So I got to work. Not just with tools, but with patience. You see, when you're a black man in a neighborhood like Shelby Oaks, there's an art to how you handle things. You don't yell. You don't throw hands. You outthink. You outplay. You let the disrespect build its own stage. Then you shine a light on it so bright, folks can't help but see what's been going on all along. Let me explain how the plumbing worked. Not because you need to know pipes, but because I want you to feel every ounce of the setup. Years ago, before the city came through with their fancy water mains, we all had septic setups and gray water reroutes. Old-school systems built to handle everything from rain runoff to overflow waste. Mine was buried under a concrete slab beside the tool shed, long forgotten, but not broken. I spent that Sunday evening down in the crawl space under my house, flashlight wedged between my teeth, cursing every cobweb I hit. I didn't rush it. I had to be precise. I shut off the main valve, disconnected the city feed to the outdoor faucet she kept hijacking, and rerouted it through the old filtration bypass. Now, don't get nervous. I didn't pump anything toxic. I'm not that kind of man. But I will say this, what came through that line from now on? It wasn't exactly bottled spring water. Let's just say it had personality. The next morning, I did what I always do. Fed Mookie. Sat with my coffee. Waited. Sure enough, at 9:04 a.m., right on schedule, I heard it. That familiar hiss-clack of her sprinkler system firing up like a lawn jet engine. And then, silence. I peeked through the blinds. Karen was standing in her yard, one hand on her hip, the other holding what looked like a drooping gardenia stem. Her eyes squinted, her nose wrinkled. Then came the words that made my whole week. "What is that smell?" I nearly dropped my coffee from laughing so hard. I stepped outside, casual as can be, holding my mug like I had no earthly clue what was going on. "Morning," I called out. She looked up, frowning like she just bit into a lemon. "Something's wrong with the water," she said. "Oh yeah," I said, acting real concerned. "You sure it's not the fertilizer you're using? Some of those blends got sulfur in 'em. Real stinky stuff." She blinked. "No, it's not fertilizer. It's the water. It's brown." I coughed into my mug just to hide the grin. "Well, shoot. I don't know what to tell you, Karen. That hose you're using, that's on my property, remember? I changed some things over the weekend. Put in a gray water line to reduce city usage. You know, eco-friendly living and all." Her mouth dropped. "You rerouted your water?" "Yes, ma'am. Trying to do my part for the environment. Should have told you sooner, I guess. But I figured since that faucet's on my wall and all." She turned beet red. I mean red. She looked like someone who just realized she'd been drinking from the wrong cup all night. "You can't do that." I shrugged. "Pretty sure I can. It's on my land, it's my plumbing, and far as I know, you don't pay a cent for it. In fact," I pulled out my phone, flipping through a few screenshots. "I've got 3 months of usage logged. See here? Last bill was double what it should have been." She crossed her arms. "This is harassment." I looked her straight in the eye. "Karen, the only person harassing anybody here is the one who hooked up a hose to somebody else's water and threw pool parties on their lawn." She didn't have a comeback. She just turned around, stormed back inside, and slammed the door. Now here's where things got wild, because I thought that would be the end of it. I figured she'd be embarrassed, maybe even finally leave me alone. But oh no, Karen was built different. 2 days later, I get a visit from a representative of the Shelby Oaks Community Council. I say that in quotes because I didn't even know we had one. Turns out, Karen had printed out her own HOA-style notices and taped them to half the houses on our street, claiming there were new water use policies that prohibited private filtration systems. And guess whose system she had a problem with? I read the letter 3 times, then tossed it on the grill and set it on fire with a flick of my lighter. But it didn't stop there. Next came the fake code enforcement letter. Then an envelope filled with photos of my yard, marked up with highlighter, pointing out violations like too many bird feeders and non-compliant grass length. You'd think this woman was getting paid to do nonsense. I showed all of it to my buddy Curtis, who works in city records. He laughed so hard he wheezed. "She sent you a citation with clip art on it, Reggie. I think the city's safe." But even still, I started to feel the pressure. It wasn't just about water anymore. It was about being targeted, gaslit, treated like my kindness was some sort of loophole in her rulebook. And that kind of pressure, that's how revolutions start. So I did what any self-respecting man would do. I held a cookout. I invited my family, my church brothers, Miss Geraldine, the landscapers she tried to boss around. Even Curtis from City Hall came with ribs. We had music, laughter, grown folks playing dominoes while Mookie chased bubbles in the yard. And we used water, plenty of it, for washing, for drinks, for one of those big misting fans just to be petty. And right there, bold as brass, I put up a sign. Private property, water line active, do not trespass. And who stood across the street the entire time? Karen, arms crossed, face tight, watching her power trickle away like runoff down a gutter. And I stood there, meat tongs in hand, sunglasses on, nodding like a man who finally got his piece back. We're at the edge now. What comes next? Oh, it ain't just about water anymore. This is the part where everything flips. You really don't want to miss part 3, because the storm's coming, and somebody's about to drown in their own lies. You ever see a grown woman go from smug to speechless in under 5 seconds? That's what happened the moment I put up that sign in my yard, bold letters, all caps. Private property, Water line active. Do not trespass. Karen stood across the street, staring like I'd insulted her ancestors. Same woman who thought she could hijack my faucet like it came with her mortgage. Now, she was watching her little empire shrink like wet laundry in the dryer. But don't let that moment fool you. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because when folks like Karen lose control, they don't walk away. They retaliate. They try to drag you down with them. And they make it real personal. The very next morning, I got a knock on my door. Real sharp, impatient knock. I opened it, expecting Amazon. Instead, I found Officer Gaines standing on my porch. City cop. Young guy. Polite face, unsure eyes. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," he said. "We got a complaint from a resident on your block. Said you might be interfering with city utilities." Now, let me be clear, I wasn't nervous. I knew I hadn't broken a single rule. But that didn't stop the anger from curling in my chest. "Come on in, officer," I said, stepping aside. "Want some coffee while you check my illegal birdbath?" He chuckled just a little. Followed me around back while I explained the plumbing system, showed him the bypass, and even walked him through the decades-old blueprints I dug out of my basement. The man took notes, took pictures, then finally said, "Everything looks legal to me." "Actually kinda genius, sir." "I appreciate that," I said. Now if only that kind of logic worked on folks who think water grows on trees. He closed his notepad and gave me a look I won't forget, the kind of look that says, "I know exactly who filed this nonsense." And just like that, he was gone. But Karen? Oh, she was just getting warmed up. By the end of the week, things had escalated like a soap opera. One neighbor, Paul, from 2 doors down, suddenly started siding with Karen. Said my water setup was unsightly. Said I was disrupting community harmony. Really, Paul? You weren't saying that last summer when I let your kids run through my sprinkler while you grilled ribs on my driveway. Then another neighbor, Linda, who never spoke more than a polite wave before, started handing out flyers about a petition for HOA oversight. Mind you, we ain't had an HOA since 1999. You see where this is going? Karen was organizing. Now let me tell you something, organizing ain't a bad thing. But when the purpose is to bully someone out of their rights, that's not organizing, that's targeted harassment with a clipboard. She wasn't just coming for my water anymore. She wanted my reputation. My peace. My standing in a community I'd lived in longer than she'd known how to spell irrigation. So what did I do? I fought back, not with shouting, not with pettiness, but with something much stronger. Receipts. I went to my garage and pulled out everything I'd been collecting since day one. Photos of her hose connected to my faucet. Screenshots of her party invites online, boasting about endless backyard water access. Security footage from my trail cam showing her crossing property lines. Copies of my water bills before and after she moved in. I compiled it all into a single document. 56 pages. I labeled it Water Usage Discrepancies and Neighborhood Misuse, Shelby Oaks, 2025. Then I made 3 copies. One for the city office, one for the Shelby County Neighborhood Mediator, and one for Karen herself. I slid it under her door with a post-it that said, "Since you love paperwork, enjoy the full story." The next day, she knocked on my door. Hard. She was fuming. "I can't believe you're stalking me." "Excuse me. You've been taking pictures? Recording me? That's harassment." I didn't even flinch. I crossed my arms and said, "Karen, that's called evidence. And I promise you, every bit of it is timestamped, legal, and already shared with the folks who need to see it." She opened her mouth like she was gonna throw a tantrum right there on my porch, but all that came out was a dry wheeze of frustration. "You think this is funny?" "No. I think it's over." And I shut the door. Quiet. Calm. But behind that door, my heart was pounding. Not from fear. From relief. Because for the first time since this whole circus began, I wasn't playing defense anymore. But you know what happens when you shine a light on a bully? Sometimes the neighbors start to see clearly too. A few days later, Miss Geraldine came by with banana pudding, the real kind, with the vanilla wafers soft from chillin' overnight. She sat on my porch swing and said, "I read that packet, baby. All of it. She's out of line." Then Curtis from City Hall came by. Then the landscapers I hired. Then Simone, my daughter, posted the story online without names and folks lit up the comments. My dad went through the same thing. These people think politeness means weakness. Glad someone's standing up to backyard bullies. I wasn't alone anymore. And that changed everything. Because now when Karen strutted down the sidewalk in her little visor and fake pearls, folks didn't nod. They didn't smile. They crossed the street or looked away. Not in a mean way, just in that way folks do when they've seen behind the curtain and didn't like what they saw. Her power was unraveling. But I still hadn't seen the last of her. Because just when I thought the war was over, just when I thought the hoses were packed up, the sprinklers silenced, and the peace restored, she showed up with a clipboard. And behind her? A man in a blazer. And another woman with a name tag. And they were walking toward my house. We've reached the breaking point. You felt the pressure build, but the collapse? That's next. Part 4 brings the final reckoning, and you will not believe how this neighborhood story ends. Stay tuned. You owe it to yourself to see how justice really flows. I'll be real with you, by the time Karen marched up my walkway with that blazer-wearing mystery man and clipboard in hand, I thought I'd seen it all. Turns out she had one last act left in her one-woman HOA circus. Mookie barked first. That deep, slow growl he only gives strangers who walk too confident. I stepped outside onto the porch, coffee in hand, same mug I'd been sipping from since her sprinkler sprayed my begonias months ago. The same mug I used the morning I rerouted my line. The same mug I'd raised later that evening in victory. But we'll get there. Reggie Thompson, the man asked, stepping forward with that corporate stiff smile folks wear when they're about to say something you know you ain't gonna like. That's me, I replied. And this is private property, so unless you got a badge or a warrant, I'd suggest you introduce yourself proper. Karen jumped in like this was her talent show moment. This is Robert Ackley. He represents Greenhaven Home Partners, the new developer looking to bring structure and standards back to Shelby Oaks. We've been working on forming a formal HOA to clean up the community. Clean up the community, huh? I said, raising an eyebrow. Funny how that always starts with the only black homeowner on the block getting targeted. Robert blinked like he'd swallowed a bug. And no, sir, this has nothing to do with the... Cut it, I said. I've seen the flyers. I've got your fake citations and I've spoken to the city myself. This little campaign? It's done. Karen didn't blink. She just smiled wide and toothy like she knew something I didn't. You might want to watch the attitude, Mr. Thompson, she said, smoothing her skirt. The board has received multiple neighborhood concerns, including noise complaints, unsightly construction, and unauthorized utility usage. It's all been documented. Now, I ain't no fool. I knew this wasn't about grass clippings or garden hoses. This was personal. It was about a woman who couldn't stand that I didn't bend, didn't smile when she demanded something, didn't apologize for protecting what was mine. So I did what I do best. I let the facts speak. Let me show you something, Robert. I stepped inside and came back with my now notorious binder, 56 pages deep and growing. Labeled, indexed, color-coded tabs, receipts from water bills, time-stamped photos, city records, and signed neighbor statements. I dropped it on a folding table like a mic. Take your time. Or you can scroll down to the part where your friend here hosted an unlicensed party on my lawn using my water while I was out of town. Karen's smile flickered. Robert scanned a few pages, his mouth twitching. Then he sighed. Karen, is this true? Silence. Karen? She huffed, crossed her arms. Well, he didn't say I couldn't. Did you ask permission to access his plumbing? Robert pressed. No answer. You filed these complaints and didn't disclose that you were using his utilities? He asked again. Still nothing. He turned back to me, red creeping up his neck. Mr. Thompson. I'm deeply sorry. This is not how we operate. We're going to step away from this effort. Smart move, I said. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like someone who just realized the spotlight burned hotter than expected. Robert handed back the binder with both hands, respectful now. Like a man who just saw the full picture. If she continues to bother you, he added, let the city know. Or call me directly. You shouldn't have to deal with this. They left. No more clipboards. No more smug talk. Just two people walking away with their tails tucked and a whole neighborhood watching through blinds. Now, you'd think that'd be the end. But see real resolution? It doesn't come in dramatic exits or public defeats. It comes in the days after. When the noise dies down and folks have to sit with the consequences of their choices. And for Karen? That came fast. The next week, I got a knock at my door. I opened it expecting the mailman, but there she stood. No pearls. No Crocs. Just plain jeans, no makeup, eyes tired like she hadn't slept right in days. Mr. Thompson, she started. I stayed quiet. I wanted to say I'm sorry. She shuffled her feet. Her voice cracked just a little. I moved in thinking I had to fix everything. I didn't understand how much I was messing up. Now don't get it twisted, I didn't melt. I didn't invite her in for tea. But I listened. Because that's who I am. Always have been. And maybe, just maybe, she needed someone to hear her more than she needed someone to fight. She went on. Talked about pressure. About her divorce. About how she thought taking control of things would make her feel less lost. And I thought if I just looked like I had it all together, nobody would notice how broken I was inside. I stood on that porch, wind brushing through the oak trees, Mookie sitting beside me, quiet as always, and finally said, "Well, you've said your piece. That's a start." She looked up, eyes shiny but steady. "You don't have to forgive me." "I won't," I said plain. "But I'll let you grow from it." She nodded, then walked away. No dramatics. No clipboard. Just a woman learning the long, slow lesson of humility. Weeks passed. The neighborhood changed. Folks stopped whispering and started waving again. Miss Geraldine's porch chairs? Now considered artistic. Paul brought over barbecue. Even Linda apologized with a homemade pie and a note that read, "I was wrong." And me? I kept sipping my coffee. Kept feeding Mookie. Kept trimming my lawn the same way I did before the nonsense started. But now there was peace. Not because Karen got run out, but because she got the message. You don't get to stomp through someone's life and expect silence. You don't get to rewrite the rules and call it order. And you sure as daylight don't steal from someone, call it help, and expect a thank you card. I didn't win by yelling. I didn't win by stooping. I won by standing. Quiet. Firm. With the truth in one hand and the water valve in the other. That old faucet? Still there. Still locked. Still connected to the backup tank. Because some lessons don't need to be unlearned, just remembered. And every time I walk past it, I smile. Not out of spite, but because I know the price of peace. And I paid it with patience. This was never just about water. It was about dignity. About boundaries. About standing tall when the world tries to shrink you. And now? That faucet's dry. But the message? Still flows.